the question they were asking is, how do I grow my organization? How do I grow my business? And my response was always to make sure that you as the leader are healthy. Make sure that you're healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually.
We get it. You're busy. You want to grow, and we want to help. You're passionate about your craft because it deeply matters to you. Your faith is important. It's your foundation. At Stay Forth, we coach leaders to avoid burnout, live and lead with clarity, purpose, and from a place of health. We want you to experience long-term impact. Welcome to the journey. Hal, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, Alan. Thank you so much for the podcast and the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, we sounds like our hearts are really aligned right now for leaders, and we are going to crack open your new book. Congrats on that. Very excited to look at not only how we serve, but how we can continue serving for the long haul. We talk a lot about that here. And I know that this is so close to your heart. You guys do incredible work with Convoy of Hope, and friends will put them in the show notes. If you have not heard of Convoy, you need to. They do unbelievable work. But we're going to start with you first. Why don't you go back to a little bit of your story and childhood, and you have a very intense childhood story that you actually began to kind of share a little bit with me. Why don't you start there as a foundation for some of the work that you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. When I was 12 years of age, my parents were hit by a drunken driver. My father was killed instantly. My mother was seriously injured, would be in the hospital for a number of months, broken bones, internal injuries. And we didn't have insurance. The man who hit them didn't have insurance. So the family had to go on welfare. And we really survived on the handouts and the kindness and food stamps, quite frankly. And there was often days where we, didn't have any food in the cupboards. And so we'd go to school without a sack lunch, and times we had holes in our shoes. And, so when you're raised poor, you begin a quest not to be poor anymore. And that certainly was my journey. And I thought the best way to escape poverty was through education. And so I began working my way through college, earned several degrees, and in my 20s began writing books as a ghostwriter. And one of those projects took me to Calcutta, India, and where I met Mother Teresa and interviewed Mother Teresa. And in the course of the interview, she turned the tables on me, and she just said, "Young man, what are you doing to help the poor and the suffering?" And I figured, I better not lie to her, better tell her the truth. And I told her I'm really not doing much of anything. And she said, "Well, everyone can do something. Just do the next kind thing that God puts in front of you." And so 30 years ago, I loaded up a pickup truck with $300 worth of groceries and started handing them out to working poor families. And that was the start of Convoy of Hope. But it really began, I think, in a great way from my childhood, because I would not have made it through my teen years. I would have chosen a life of bitterness if it wasn't for the kindness that was shown to me and my family. People would bring groceries to our door. People would put new shoes on our feet. Our church wrapped its arms around us and just showed us that they cared, they loved us. One family took us in. All they owned was a trailer, a single wide trailer. They had kids of their own, but they allowed us to live with them for a year while my mom was recuperating. And these people, they sacrificed their privacy, they drained their savings account so 4 kids could have a home. It was their kindness that I think allowed me as an adult not to choose a life of bitterness and anger.
Wow. And we're going to talk some about burnout and avoiding burnout, taking care of ourselves so we can continue doing good work. But I wanted to camp out first on those first couple years of Convoy, or maybe take us back to an intense growth season. You talk about how you had a lot of ambition as a young man. When you started Convoy, describe one of those kind of crazy growth seasons maybe that you guys experienced.
Yeah, there have been several. Convoy of Hope today is the 35th largest charity in the United States. out of 1.5 million charities. Convoy is the 35th largest. So there have been many growth spurts along this journey. Certainly one would be Katrina. When Katrina hit, we were sitting on, maybe 500,000 pounds of food, and we decided let's just empty the warehouse. And we pledged, okay, let's see if we can send 100 truckloads. And it just continued to grow. We didn't send 100 semis, we sent 1,000 semis in response to Katrina. And I think that's kind of been our journey, is that we, even during the pandemic, we thought, well, let's try to provide 10 million meals. Well, that ended up being 200 million meals. And so, it's just been a crazy journey.
In those seasons, let's maybe talk about the Katrina season. How in the world did you and your staff stay healthy during that time?
It was very difficult. I think because you are waking up every morning realizing that if you don't do your job, that people aren't going to be fed, people are going to suffer. And it wasn't just here in the United States, but it was global. And all our projects around the world had the same issues. And so I think we probably overworked. I think we were overwhelmed. The smart thing we did was, after being in that for a number of months, we took a break. We took 3 weeks to recuperate and to catch our breath. If we hadn't done that, I think the burnout would have been much more severe. And so I think the principle there is don't be afraid to take a break. Many years ago in my journalistic life, I interviewed Ted Turner, and the famed media mogul. And I asked him, I said, so what's the key to your success? And he said, leisure time. And he talked to me about the fact that he would hop out on his boat and he would go and just break away from it all. And I've never forgotten that. But for Convoy, we really, we have to watch that pretty, closely, because our team is responding to the cries of the poor really all over the world. And it's really important that people are healthy.
Absolutely. Well, your brand new book, What Really Matters. Tell us the subtitle, because I love it so much.
Yeah. How to care for yourself and serve a hurting world.
That right there. And that may be the best subtitle I've heard in years, by the way, because I think we're all asking that as leaders. It's beautiful. So what was your why behind this? What led up to you investing so many hours into writing this book?
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened was that I was being bombarded with questions from leaders, pastors, business leaders. Bombarded is a good word. It was a barrage. And the question they were asking is, how do I grow my organization? How do I grow my business? And my response was always to make sure that you as the leader are healthy. Make sure that you're healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually. And every time they would look back at me and say, I know that, but what's the secret sauce? How do I grow the business? And I would come back and I would say, yeah, you just have to be healthy. Because as a person of faith, I believe that we are the foundation. Our heart is the foundation that God builds upon. And if that foundation is flawed, if it's not healthy, God can only grow so tall and do so much. And so, so I thought, rather than responding to hundreds of, questions, why don't I just put it in a book? And so it's filled with principles, but it's filled with very practical ways that you can really change your lifestyle, change your priorities, and to be healthier.
All right. So give us a couple of the principles in there. How do we continue to serve and care for ourselves?
Yeah. I mean, again, this is very practical, but I do not think or worry or try to solve problems after 8 o'clock every night. So when 8 o'clock hits, it's an alarm bell. I'm not going to try and solve tomorrow's problems by lying awake in bed after midnight, because if I do that, I'm losing sleep and I'm really stealing from tomorrow. And so, when I walk in the door in the morning, 8 o'clock, I need to be fresh. I need to be focused. And if you're losing sleep, worrying about problems, trying to solve problems, another thing that a change that I made was that I used to have meetings at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I came to the realization that dinner needed to be for my family, and it needed to be for recuperation from the day. And so I rarely take a dinner meeting. It's breakfast or lunch. A third thing is make vacation sacred. My wife and I, we have 4 daughters. At the beginning of every year, we would set aside time for vacation and for rest. And those dates were sacred. I remember one time I was invited to the Oval Office with 5 other people and by the president, and I turned it down. I declined. Why? Because my family vacation time was more important. And I wanted my children to know that they were more important than what was going to happen in a meeting in the Oval Office. And I think they would tell you to this day that that's something they've never forgotten.
Yeah, a kid's not going to forget that. I chose you over the president, so I love you a lot.
Exactly, yeah.
And I want to drill into some practices here in a little bit. I love some of those principles and how you're modeling that. What about some mindset shifts? Maybe some bigger shifts in terms of shifts that leaders have to make to not just avoid burnout, but to continue to serve well, lead well, and be healthy for the long haul.
Yeah, Alan, maybe I could go back to my own journey and tell you that I learned a lot through trial and error and doing it wrong. At the age of 50, I found myself in the hospital on the verge of a heart attack, and they had to put a stent in my heart. And coming out of the hospital, I realized that I was trying to do too much. I wasn't focused. And, I came out of there, and I was, at the time, I was editor of an international magazine, hundreds of thousands circulation, and I resigned. I turned down several book writing contracts. I stopped speaking every weekend. I was doing 42 weekends a year, speaking in churches, speaking for businesses. And I came out of the hospital with a determination, I'm going to get focused. So again, I learned the hard way. I was trying to do too much. And again, being a person of faith, I believe I was making sacrifices that God wasn't asking me to make. Maybe it was, again, my upbringing, being raised in poverty. Maybe I had reckless ambition. A lot of times we do. It's reckless. We don't realize the effect that ambition is having on others and on ourselves. And there in that hotel room, I discovered that, okay, I need to make some significant changes. And the first was I need to really restrain my ambition. And rather than me just going out and responding to every need, as a person of faith, I needed to pray before I responded and ask God if that was something he wanted me to do. Maybe he wants someone else to do it. Again, in my early life as a ministry leader, organizational leader, I didn't pray enough. I wish I had prayed more and worked less, quite honestly, and certainly in those early years. And I think that's one of the reasons that Convoy of Hope has grown so rapidly in the last 12, 15 years is because of the changes that took place in me. In my heart, it became less about me and more about what God wanted to accomplish. And it's been a crazy ride, but millions and millions of people are being served every year.
So how are you different, Hal, than you were 15 years ago as you lead and as you serve, and even just your posture in the room as people experience you?
Yeah, I think I use more restraint than I used to. When I would see a need or an opportunity, I would just immediately, let's go for it. Regardless of the damage done in my wake, let's just go for it. And I think I use more restraint now. I'm willing to sleep on things. I'm willing to pray more about decisions. And you can't respond to every opportunity and every need. You have to be selective. If you were in our offices, you know that there's, again, a barrage of needs that are coming at us every day. And I think I've learned the value of praying and using restraint. I think the second thing is that you can overreact to problems and challenges. And I think I've learned to step back from challenges and maybe take a 360 view of them, and really to discern how to respond. So, I mean, those are a couple of things that probably have changed. There's probably a lot more than that. My wife could probably share a few.
Sure. Maybe is there a dimension of health or of caring for ourselves as leaders that we are particularly bad at and we need to work harder than some of the rest?
Yeah, I think for me, I thought that that my emotions, my physical care, was a necessary sacrifice to accomplish the goal. And as long as the goal was accomplished, that I was inoculated from the consequences of my behavior. And that's a lie. That's not true. I think realizing that every day we got to take care of ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Every day. It's a constant journey. I think that's, for me, something that I wish I didn't have to have a health crisis to really figure that out.
There's a lot of people listening here, pre-50 and pre-health crisis. We haven't experienced maybe something like a wake-up call that you have. What are your concerns for some of the younger leaders out there right now that you specifically can share and contextualize for them?
Yeah, I think one is make sure you're living under the right expectations. A lot of times people are driven. It's not a desire for success as much as it is you're trying to live up to someone else's expectations. And it's really important that we're honest with ourselves, that we ask ourselves, why do we want to achieve this? I think that's one thing that, as a young leader, I missed. I was living under the expectations of others. And, honestly, as a person of faith, I need to live under God's expectations. And I think that's one thing. I think the second piece I would share, and the book goes into some of this, certainly I think when we're younger leaders, we tend to idolize people who are not the most humble, not the most faithful. We tend to idolize people who are the most visible and who are loud. And we set them up on a pedestal. And without really realizing it, we're trying to achieve what they've achieved. They're our model. We're trying to emulate them. I think as a younger leader, I wish I had tried to emulate people who really exude humility and faithfulness. So I think who you idolize, who you look up to, has a lot to do with how you're going to behave in the days to come.
Yes. So good. What are some lies that we believe? Underneath maybe we're over-sacrificing in ways. You talk about areas you neglected in your own life, but what are some lies we believe about serving that cause our behavior to spin out?
Yes, I think that a lot of times when you're an A personality or someone who's driven, you feel like you have to work 110%. If you don't, you're disappointing other people, you're disappointing yourself, and you're disappointing God. That is a lie. That's not true. We're not expected to work more than 100% because when we do, something is sacrificing. Something is hurting. We may not recognize it, but in my case, my body, my heart was suffering because I was so driven. And again, Alan, my ambition wasn't necessarily just to be successful, my ambition was in large part because of conversations with people like Mother Teresa. You know, I wanted to do something. I want to make a difference in the world. You know, so it was an ambitious for good things, but I was ambitious for the right things. But I didn't take good care of myself along the way, and that was something that caught up with me at the age of 50. Yeah, I could probably chase that quite a bit. There's a lot I've learned about taking care of ourselves, and that's what the book is filled with. It's just filled with principles and practical ideas that, unfortunately, I had to learn through trial and error.
Yeah, a lot of time-tested stories in there. So I'm an author, and I understand everything in here is helpful at some level, but Hal, be honest with us. What is maybe the part of the book that you feel like this could be the most transformative to somebody who's reading it or listening to it on Audible?
I think to understand that success can be more dangerous than failure. And here's the reason, is if you're experiencing a level of success or you see like that opportunity that can lead to great success in your eyes and the eyes of other people, you can become self-reliant. It can be all about what you do, not what other people do and not what God does. It can be about you. I think in starting Convoy of Hope 30 years ago, I thought it was reliant on what I did. And I think the more I was in it, I began to realize, no, it's about bringing people along with me on the journey. It's about building an army. It's not about building an organization. It's about being a catalyst for a movement of compassion across the United States and around the world. And, you know, we have over 100,000 volunteers every year. We have 20,000 churches that are involved with us. And again, that's to me is long-term, that's more important than building another charity. And I think once we got that in alignment, things began to change. But I think the takeaway is that success is more dangerous than failure.
Yeah, we've seen so much of that in our culture. Man, I love what you're talking about here. Obviously, so much of what you guys have been able to do now makes a lot of sense with these changes that have happened in the heart of their leader. Talk for a few minutes about practices. And sometimes I call practices $10 investments with $10,000 returns, you know, whether it's spiritual formation or just the rhythms in our life. However we refer to these, practices are key. What are 4 or 5 practices that you would invite leaders to begin to experiment with that maybe they haven't tried yet, but that really could bring some level of health?
Yeah, I think my daughters years ago asked me, Dad, what do you want written on your tombstone? And I said that our dad treated everyone the same. And I think there's a tendency, Alan, to treat people who maybe will open doors of opportunity, whether it's business or an organization like Convoy of Hope. It's the tendency is to treat people differently. You treat those who will provide you with opportunity one way, and you treat people that can't provide an opportunity per se another way. So I think modeling that and creating an organization or a business where it's somewhat flat and that the org chart is not something that everybody pays attention to is really a good thing. And so when people talk about Convoy, who I would say are leaders who really know the inside workings of Convoy, they often talk about the culture that's been created here. And I think as leaders, we have to model that culture. We can't expect other people to do what we're not willing to do. So that's one thing I would just say that at Convoy, we're really trying to create a culture where everybody is valued. And I think that's modeled by leaders. Another thing that comes to mind that Convoy does, and again, because of lessons I learned early in this organization, is we really emphasize family. And so I know this is probably not something everyone can do, but, Convoy pays for the medical benefits of the entire family, not just the employee. That's expensive, but it's something we felt was necessary. We give people half days on Fridays. We try to give them between 2 and 3 weeks at Christmas. We're looking for opportunities to give people opportunity to just really recharge their batteries, and we take that very seriously. So anyway, I think team building is just a really important part of really achievement, and but achievement with health, and that's certainly our quest.
I love that. I love not just how you guys have served in incredible ways, but the healthy culture that you guys are creating to nurture those employees. Hal, thanks so much for everything you do. Even thanks for the labor of love of this book that in advance you write this, and it's going to serve so many other folks. Incredible to see really the dent that you guys have made. And, we have a hurricane brewing right now, and I know that you guys are constantly aware of how to step in and serve. So I just want to say thanks on behalf of so many for that. And I want to give a gift as you leave, just in closing, a gift to the listener. Plenty of people are discouraged right now. The economy's in a tough spot. I met with a leader last night who could share 4 or 5 leaders who are struggling, and businesses and organizations are in a tough spot. And so I just thought the appropriate way to end would be for you just encouraging that leader right now who's listening to this and they're driving home and they're discouraged. How can you just kind of leave a statement that imprints that encouragement on them? I would love for you to do that as we close.
Sure. I used to think that my life was intended to be peaks and valleys. And I somewhere along the line, I came to the realization that it wasn't peaks and valleys, that life is a lot more linear than that. It's hardship followed by what I call miracles or provision or opportunity. It's hardship followed by opportunities and miracles. And I think when you look at life that way, if you're in the middle of hardship, if you're experiencing a hard time either in your family or in your business, your organization, your church, whatever it may be, understand this: if you're going through a hard time, it's probably the beginning of your next miracle or your next opportunity. And there are lessons to be learned in the middle of hardship. And a lot of times we try to run away from hardship, but I think there are lessons to be learned when we're going through difficult times. And so my prayer for your listeners would be that God would teach them lessons and give them ideas in the middle of hardship, but also open their eyes to the opportunities that are forthcoming, that are just around the bend. And, so when I look back on my life, that's what it is, Alan. It's a series of hardship followed by opportunity/miracles, and hardship followed by more miracles. That's what life is. Hardship-free life, I don't think it exists. I don't think it's reality. And so I just want to encourage everybody. You're going through a hard time right now, hold on, persevere, because something really good is coming down the pike.
Beautiful. Hal, thanks so much for the conversation. Thanks for your book. And what really matters is a gift to so many other folks. You guys are a gift. But thanks so much for how you serve, and thanks for coming by the podcast.
Thank you, Alan. Great to be with you.